Hello water polo fans. Welcome to another world-class water polo Chalk Talk. This is Coach Dean Kent, and for those who have played for IE Storm Water Polo Club or Redlands High School, you will know who I am. Today we'll be reviewing a game between USC and University of Redlands from the IE tournament in September of 2017. I chose this game because it's a great illustration of some of the plays that I have been teaching in high school and in club. You should note that this is an early season game, so USC was using this not only to get a look at their young players, but also to work on specific plays. Most of the club and high school coaches that I know have a few plays that they'll call out for specific situations like 6-on-5 or perhaps right after a timeout or a restart. But most high-level sports programs will have a playbook that they will draw plays from against opponents, specific opponents. And from those I talk to who have been to USC, that's what they say that program would do. So the purpose here is to identify plays and try to create our own playbook if we can. So for this reason, instead of doing what we've done in previous Chalk Talks and running through a full quarter of plays and the back and forth and doing sort of a play-by-play, instead I'm going to pick specific plays, ones that have been run maybe multiple times during the game, and compare that perhaps to the kinds of plays that we've taught in our high school and club and the reasons why we do them. So I'll first run them at full speed, then run them again in slow motion, perhaps stopping on occasion to point out specific players or specific situations or options that may be there, and then run them again at full speed so that perhaps you can watch them a second time and then pick up some things that you didn't see the first time. So when I do this, I'd like you to look at the play at first and see what it is you can pick out of it. And then afterwards, the second time we run through it, see if you see what we've discussed or if there's something else maybe that I had even missed. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started with this Chalk Talk. So before we start on actual game film, what I want to do is review some basics. And I know many of you will already know what these basics are, but some of you may not, and I want to make sure that the terminology I use is known by everybody, so there's no confusion while we're watching the actual video clips what I'm talking about. So here in this first image, you see the typical umbrella offense and a press defense, and that is the fundamental setup in water polo. You've got your center in the middle, labeled with the C. Then you have the positions from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is important to know. It's the strong wing, then the strong flat, then the point, the weak flat, and then the weak wing going around from 1 to 5. Now, in Europe, they use the opposite numbering. Where we have 5, they call it number 1, and then where we have number 1, they call it number 5. Now, some of you may think this is not that important, but it is actually very important because in games, we're going to tell you where you are playing or who we want you to watch based on their number, meaning their position number, not their cap number. So if we tell you to go to the 4, then you're going to go to where that 04 is listed on this diagram. If we tell you to go to the 1 or the 5, that means one of those wings. So again, this is very important. In this particular case, what we're showing is a press defense where you can see everyone is pressed out hard on the offensive player and the center defender is fronting that center. This is the best defense for a counterattack, and it essentially shuts down all of the offense. But the only way you can do this is if that center is fronted. If the center is a good center and he can get in front or she can get in front, then we have to play some other type of defense. Now, in other sports, this will be called a man-to-man defense, and it is, again, the fundamental, it is the preferred defense if you can play it. But what we're going to see next is the center gets in front. We can't prevent that center to get in front, so the next type of defense is known as a zone defense. In this defense, you are not playing a person, you are playing an area. So each one of those defenders, the X1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're just covering an area and allowing the passes to come from the outside. This is actually what we use on a 6-on-5. We'll only have 5 defenders, but we'll be playing in a zone because we can't cover man-to-man, so we go into a zone. But sometimes if there's a really strong center and we don't think they have a really strong outside shooter, we might go into a zone. Because, as you can see, we have a player drop back from the 3 spot, so we can make sure the center doesn't get an entry pass. And since they don't have a strong outside shooter, we're willing to let them go ahead and shoot from the perimeter. One of the other advantages of this defense is that it is very difficult to drive on because you don't have a defender chasing. Now, as you go to the higher levels, it's rare to find a team that does not have a good outside shooter. And when they have a center and a good outside shooter, we have to do something else. And that's when we go into a drop. A typical drop is, as pictured here, a 3-4 drop. Some teams will do a 2-4 drop. Some people will do a 4-5 drop. But 3-4 is fairly typical because if a team has a lefty, you do not want to leave that 5 spot open. And what you're really trying to do is get that shooter at the 4. That's usually going to be their weakest shooter. Unless they have 2 lefties, it's going to be a right-hander who is not going to have the greatest angle. Their 2 spot and 3 spots are usually going to be their best shooters, and you definitely don't want to leave your 1 spot open. Now, if they don't have a lefty at the 5 spot, then we would very likely do a 4-5 drop because the shot from the 5 spot by a right-hander is going to be the weakest shot. It's easy for the goalie to cover that post, so that's where it would be the same principle, but we would drop from the 4-5. But on a 3-4 drop, as you can see, what they're really doing is they are alternating, dropping back onto that center, the 3 and the 4 defenders. Now, what we're going to do is call those the X3 and X4. And as you can see on this diagram, that is in fact how they are labeled. So from this time forward, when we are either in a game or we are talking to you in the pool and giving you instruction, that's what we're going to say is the 3, the 4, the 2, the 1, those are offense. X1, X2, X3, X4, those are going to be defense. So as you can see here, the 3 and the 4 are alternating back and forth depending on who has the ball. If the 3 has the ball, as in this diagram, the X3 is pressing and the 4 is dropping back. If the 4 has the ball, the X3 is dropping and the 4 is pressing out. And since they are moving, we're going to use a little bit different terminology as well. Whoever is pressing out, we're actually going to say you are knocking down. If they have the ball and they haven't passed it while you are knocking down, that's when you press. But while you are moving out to them, you have your left hand up. If they're a righty, shot blocking, moving toward them, and then attacking them to knock down the ball so they can't easily shoot, trying to force a bad entry, a bad shot choice, or a bad pass over to the 4. And even if the 4 gets it, we're hoping for a bad shot choice there as well. So in this case, where the 3 is being pressed out, being knocked down by the X3, we're hoping that the poor choice is to try to enter the ball so that the X4 can steal it, or he makes a bad pass to the 4 attacker. And the 4 attacker perhaps makes a bad choice and tries to take a bad shot from a weak angle. Now, a drop defense is simple to implement, but it is actually very difficult to execute against a good team. So what we will do instead is often implement a gap, which you see here. It offers the advantages of a drop defense, but also provides a little bit of relief for the X3, and you just need a good swimmer with good conditioning at the X4 to implement this. So just as with the alternating drop defense, the benefit of this is to take away their strong shooter at the 2 and their one attacker as well as a lefty at the 5. And what we're really hoping for is that we can force their weakest shooter to take the shot. That would typically be at the 4. And against the teams that we've played in high school at the lower level and some of the lower level club teams, you'll find that even the 3 shooter really doesn't want to shoot and really wants to pass it to the 2 or the 1. And as mentioned earlier, the only real benefit of this over the alternating drop is that you only need one good swimmer in good condition to attack both the 3 and the 4. But both of those defenses have the same weakness, which is a team with good passers and a good shooter at the 3 and possibly a good shooter or even a decent shooter at the 4. It's very difficult to keep them both in check, and you'll end up one of them or both of them will end up getting opportunities to shoot because the defenders just can't get back there in time. So as we move to higher levels and run into more skilled teams, we end up needing to implement a little more advanced form of defense, which is going to be a 3S. Now there's also a 2S, which we're not going to cover here, and that's used for a slightly different purpose. At this time, we're assuming that our center can be pushed to the 1-2 side, and we can press the 1 and the 2. So our X3 and X4 are going to still do somewhat of a drop and a gap, but it's going to be more effective in shutting down a good passing team at the 3 and the 4 spot. As you look at this diagram, you'll see that the X4 gaps over to cover the 3, while the X3 drops back to cover the center. Then when the ball is passed back over to the 4, what the X3 will do is slide over and shot block the 4 and move out to knock down the 4, while the former X4 drops back to cover the center. The ball gets passed over. The new X4 that was X3 now gaps over to the 3. So they're moving in a rotation and helping each other out. And so even if there is good passers and good shooters, you're still harassing them and not getting totally tired. The downside of this is that it takes more cooperation and more communication, and it really does require a lot of practice, but it is probably the best defense. Okay, so now we've covered all the fundamental defenses, and we're going to move on to offense. So what we are seeing here in this diagram is the standard center-based offense, which we would consider to be the most common offense. It's probably the most desirable offense. The center is in the middle of the cage, has the best opportunity to shoot from 2 meters. The defender is at a disadvantage because the rules give the center, once he or she has position, gives them special privileges. The defender can't pull around or they will get excluded. So this would be the ideal sort of situation as far as offense is concerned. In this diagram, you'll see that the defense is all pressing except for the X4, which is slightly dropped. The ball goes over to the 4 spot, which forces the X4 to press back out again and try to knock down. There is no other drop. The ball then gets entered straight into center, and then the center has lots of time to take a shot. So again, this is considered the most desirable situation, but is not going to be common because that center has such privileges. Teams have to try to implement strategies to prevent the ball from going into center, which opens up the other 2 places where we would like to shoot from, which are the perimeter and then somewhere on the inside via a driver. So those are the perimeter-based offense, we'll call it, and the driver-based offense. This being the center-based offense, and again, is the most typical. So now what we're going to see in this diagram is what you might consider to be the next most desirable offensive situation, which is where your perimeter shooters have opportunities. As you can see, X2, X3, X4 are slightly dropped off. That would not be normal. This would be more of a zone type defense, as we talked about earlier, where the 2, 3, and the 4 might not be strong shooters. But with a strong shooter, it would be more like a drop off of the 2 and the 4 or the 3 and the 4. And with some decent passing, what you want is that ball going back and forth between those top perimeter players. You have hopefully at least one strong shooter, possibly 2 or even 3. And as they drop back and try to knock back down again, they either get out of sync and stay back so that you get a shot, or if they all end up pressing out, now you can throw that ball into center. So this gives you more options, and it utilizes a fairly simple offensive strategy, which is throw it into center to get a shot, or shoot from the outside when the clock starts running down. And it doesn't require a whole lot of coordination, a whole lot of movement. It's mostly passing, which means that as a coach, you can focus on developing those specific skills, which is ball handling, passing, and shooting, and therefore not a whole lot else needs to be worked on, and it's much easier to implement, particularly at a lower level. But as one might expect, as you move up to higher levels, coaches are able to implement defenses such as the 3S and the 2S, which more effectively shut down this kind of offense, and now you need to add some additional complexity, and that's how we move into the drive-based offenses. So what you're seeing in this diagram is a very basic drive-based offense pattern, and the downside of a drive-based offense is that it requires a lot of coordination, a lot of communication. Everybody on the team is involved. It's not just a few people on offense who have good skills while everybody else sits and simply ties up whoever their defensive player is, trying to keep them from double teaming the other players that are better. This really requires that everyone on the team have good skills, be able to swim, be able to handle the ball, be able to shoot, and be able to recognize situations. You have to be able to see every other offensive player on your team and know where the defense is. Drive-based offenses are very complex, and there are just lots of little options that can be run, and we're going to go through some of them, and this is essentially what we're going to see in the USC offense as we review the game. There's a lot of movement, and yes, there is some just passing and shooting if the defense allows it, because that, of course, lets you rest. You don't have to move and swim, and if they're going to let you just sort of walk in and shoot the ball or enter the ball into center, then that's going to be, as I mentioned before, the preferred way of generating offense. So I don't want to go into too much detail here. I'm just going to kind of go over the basics because there are so many different nuances and so many different options that can be gone over, and we will be discussing them in this video. I'm just going to describe the fundamentals. So you'll see the 3 is driving down towards where the 1 is, and at the same time the 1 is moving up and out to draw that defender out. The 2 drives across cage to what we call a ball side. So you've got a backdoor drive, a ball side drive. And when the 2 drives across, you'll see that 5 player moves up and away. The 4 player is going to stay, hopefully have the ball and stay where they are, because by driving across, the 2 and the 3 driving across, they are taking those 2 defenders, the X2 and X3, with them. If they don't, the ball could be passed to that driver, and now they've got inside water at 2 meters or close enough to 2 meters where they can get a good shot. So those defenders have to follow. What that means is that the X4 is the only defender left to drop. And since as a defending team, you don't want that center to get the ball, so the X4 has to drop. That leaves the 4 an opportunity to handle the ball and make passes and look for somebody who is open. So if the 2 or the 3 is not open, The center might be open. The 4 can slide in if the 4 is a good shooter, possibly take a shot. If that hasn't happened, let's say the X1 stayed back to cover that 3 driver. Now, as you see, the 1 spot has moved up and then slid over to where the 2 was. And if the defense hasn't made an adjustment, now the ball can be passed over to the 4. From the 4 to the 2, and that 2 might be able to get an opportunity to shoot. And this is just very basic. There are other patterns. There are things called picks, which we will go over later in this video, and screens, and those give you many, many options. So as I had mentioned before, it does require a lot of movement, a lot of cooperation. You have to have a lot more skills than you do in just a pure center-based or perimeter-based offense, and that's what we're going to mainly cover, and that's what we've been trying to teach in high school and club, is to use these movements to try to generate more offense. So with that said, let's move into the game, and we will start looking at some of the things that USC had run that is very similar to the drive patterns that we have been teaching in high school and club. All right, so what we are seeing here is the first sprint, the opening quarter sprint, and we're going to watch USC start their drive pattern. The 2 starts across, the 3 does a backdoor, the 2 does their ball side, the 1 has slid up to receive the ball, and now you're going to see them take some other options. You're going to see then a failed shot there and a counterattack. So we're going to look at that again. USC has won the sprint, and now you can see that all of the players are moving down to their spots. You've got the player on the outside moving to the 1 and to the 5 on either side. You've got the center driving straight down to the 2-meter line. Now, stop here for a moment. Look at the player from the 2 and where he is going. He quickly started moving across the cage towards the 5 spot, but what he's going to do is set a quick pick on the X3. And when he does that, that's going to make the X3 come across his legs to come down for a backdoor drive. So this is the first introduction. Some of you have seen picks before. We've worked on some picks, but this shows you, this is what USC did right off of the restart. We're going to see it again, the sprint, and we're going to see it again in the second quarter. They're going to run pretty much the same play. As I said, they used this tournament to work on various plays, and this is their first play off of the sprint. So when this starts back up again, you're going to see that 2 is going to set the pick. Then you're going to see that 3 go across his legs, come down to the 1 spot, and then the 2 will continue across on a ball side drive, while the player who was at the 1 is going to come up to pull that defender up and also be ready in case the ball turns over to prevent a counterattack. So here we see the pick being set. The 2 swims across, stops for just a second. The 3 comes across his legs, goes down to the 1. Now the 2 continues along for his ball side, essentially. And now you'll see the 1 is coming up hard to come back up, get into a shooting position, pull that defender out. Now what I want you to notice here is that the 3 who drove down back door does not have an open opportunity to get the ball, but neither does the 2. The 2 actually does not have a ball side. That Redlands defender is in a great defensive position, and because that 2 is driving across in front of the center actually is sort of fronted there as well. The 4 who's handling the ball actually has no one to pass to at the moment. In order to get that ball into center, it's going to have to come across the other side of the pool because that's where the center is facing. So that's where the 1 becomes the outlet pass. So you'll see all the defenders have covered up, and in my opinion, that's because the pick was sort of run backwards, and I'm going to provide a diagram that's going to illustrate what I mean in just a second. But what you're going to see when this clip restarts is that the pass is going to come back across to the 1, and then something else is going to happen on the other side of the pool, which is the next option in this entire movement-oriented offense. What you're going to see is on the other side of the pool, the player at the 5 is not moving up and out of the way. So his defender is able to come back and take that driver that came across from the 2, preventing an entry pass. And the 2 defender can now stop and help double team that center. So at this point, USC really doesn't have many options. Redlands has done a very good job covering up, and so the ball now has to come over to the 1. But what I want you to do is look on the opposite side of the pool and now see what the 5 does. The 5 is going to slide in towards what we call the pocket. Because his defender has dropped back to double team, or actually to take that 2, and the X2 is now double teaming the center, that leaves the 5 spot open, and he's going to slide up into the pocket. This way, when the 1 receives the ball, if no one has helped back on that 5 that slid into the pocket, then he's going to get an opportunity to get a pass and a shot. So then you're going to see the X4 is going to recognize this and come back to help. But then what I want you to do is see what that 4 does. At the same time, the person who has now become the new 5, the 2 that drove across, I want you to see what he does to help clear out that defender and create an opportunity there. So the ball comes over to the 1, who then draws a foul. There's going to be a lot of movement that happens all of a sudden here. You'll see the 5 starting to slide in to get into the pocket. At the same time, you're going to see the person that was down low, who used to be the 2, he's driving across the cage. The defender who was at the 4 recognizes he's got to come over because we now need a drop from the 2. He's going to come over and try to cover the 2. The defender that was double teaming the center is going to try to go out and press that player that came into the pocket. And then sliding up behind everybody is that 4 spot, who is a lefty, who's now come straight down, got a great opportunity, but he just mishandles the ball. Otherwise, that's a great opportunity. Now notice that the 1 who had slid up and the 1 that slid up as the 5 drove across behind that center are back. They are already coming back on defense, and they are taking away that counterattack. So let's watch that whole sequence again one more time at normal speed. You can see USC setting your pick. 1 comes up. There's no opportunity to enter the ball. So the pass comes across. The 5 slides into the pocket. Defense has to adjust. 4 swims down. And unfortunately, mishandles the ball. And off we go. So before we watch the start of the second quarter, where they run the same play again, I want to go over the concept of picks, and specifically the pick that they are running, and explain why I had said earlier that I thought they ran this backwards. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes explaining picks in general. Hopefully this will make it easier to understand the details once we go into the difference between the 2-3 pick and the 3-2 pick. So picks can be performed between any 2 offensive players, and essentially what you're doing is one offensive player will get in the way of the defender of another offensive player to screen him out. They're also called screens, releasing that other offensive player. So you've got the player who sets the pick, and then you have the player who is released by the pick. The picks are named by the first number and the second number of the position that is involved in the pick. So right here in this illustration, we have a 23 pick, or a 2-3 pick, because the 2 sets the pick and releases the 3. Now you can still have other picks, such as the 2 goes down low, sets a pick on the X1, releases the 1, then that would be a 2-1 or a 21 pick. Or you can do the opposite, where the 1 comes up, sets the pick on the X2, releases the 2, and it's called a 12 pick. You can have a 34 pick, a 43 pick, 45 pick, 54 pick. You can have any of these picks. There's even a pick to go across from, say, the 5 or the 1 across. The center does a pick, or a 3 goes down to the center and goes behind the center and picks off the 3 defender. But these are all things that as you get higher levels, you will learn many different picks. But for now, let's just focus on the one that's in this video that USC used and is similar to what we have been teaching. So let's focus on this diagram and look. It is a little busy, so I'm going to have to try to walk you through it very carefully. So look at the 0-2, the attacker. He goes across and he sets a pick on X3. At that point in time, the X3 swims across his legs, and the reason he does that is because it is illegal for a defender to swim over an attacker, but 2 players on the same team can swim over each other, and there's nothing illegal about that at all. Now, what you should notice here is that the X2 is going to move over with the 2, so that when the 3 swims over the 2's legs and traps that X3, the X2 now becomes a defender on the 3. And as you'll see, the 2 is now between that attacker and the ball. So the X2 moves over and then moves down. The X3 has also recognized that there is a pick, slides up and back a little bit, and now the X3 is also between that attacker and the ball. So in this particular case, as you saw with USC, neither of those attackers is actually open to receive the ball. And this is why I was saying it was done a little backwards. Now also recognize that the 1 attacker has moved up to try to draw that X1 defender and prevent him from being able to cover up in case that 3 who was driving backdoor actually got open. So now let's look at the opposite, which is going to be the 3-2 pick. So here you're going to see that it is the 3 that swims over and traps the X2, and then the 2 swims over the 3's legs to go ball side. Because the X3 has followed the 3 and is trying to stay between him and the cage, the attacker at 2 now gains ball side. As you can see with the squiggly line, that's the attacker, and then the straight line is the defender. So now if the 5 slides up and out of the way and takes that defender with him, the X4 does not slide back to cover up that 2 attacker. Now the 2 has a ball side and can receive the pass. If the X4 does slide back, the 4 can slide forward into the pocket and perhaps get an opportunity to shoot. Once the 3 has finished setting the pick and the 2 has swum over his legs, he now actually has position between the ball and the defender, and as you can see with the squiggly line again, can swim straight down and actually post up inside on that X2. Had the ball been at the 1 on that 2-1 pick, then both of those attackers would have been on the correct side to receive the ball. But because the ball is over at the 4, what you want to do is set the pick so that the released player has position between the defender and the ball. So that's what I was talking about with USC and why they ended up behind and didn't really have any options there. And I believe that it was because they set that pick backwards. We, in our practices, when we have been playing for Redlands and a little bit in club, we started getting into this. We've actually set a 3-1 pick. It's pretty much for the same reason. We swim down, set the pick on the X1, then the 2 just swims across, takes the defender, and then the 1 can rotate up into the pocket and perhaps get an opportunity to shoot. And if not, the 3 will be posted up inside, ready to receive a wet pass as if we have like a double post. Okay, so now that we have the description of picks, let's watch USC with their start of their second quarter. They're going to kind of run the same thing. The 2 is going to go across, going to set a pick. The 3 is going to come down. They're still not going to get any opportunity here, but this time the pass goes over to the 5, then back to the 1. Now it gets entered in, but he doesn't have an opportunity. It gets kicked out. Now he's going to try a different option, which is again that 4, but it's already been taken away. Okay, so slow motion. We'll quickly go through this, I believe, without doing a whole lot of stoppage because you've already seen it once. So you can see that 2 going over, getting ready to set that pick. He waits for the center to move ahead, then moves over, sets the pick. Redlands is sort of ready for this time. So he does go ahead and set the pick. They slip the pick. You can see they're waiting for it. Now the 3 comes back over back door. The 2 now has to try to go ball side. He swims sort of over the top of that defender, ends up getting ahead of him a little bit, but he really still does not have a ball side. The 1 has not yet rotated up, so now that 4 has to put the ball down to the 5, who came out and is waiting for that pass. He's clearing out a little bit, puts the ball over to the 2. This time, the defender does not wait, does not cause a foul. They do not wait. He enters the ball immediately because since the 5 had slid up out of the way, that 2 defender was not able to double team. He kicks the ball out. The center gets it back out after the drop. Now what you're going to see is the 5 is going to go ahead and slide in. And he's the one that's going to get that back door on the other side. So now you see the 2 is pump faking. That 5 defender is not really watching that well, but he finally does see it, comes back, and it's not quite as open as it was the last time because it really wasn't as well executed of a play. But the point of this is that there actually are multiple options. It's not just one play being done all the time, the same movements and the same passes over and over. Instead, each player is looking for who is open, what the defense has done, and making their adjustments so that they can take advantage of their different options. Everybody is involved in this play. It's not that the 5 has nothing to do. The 5 has a role to play. The 1 has a role to play. The 2 and the 3 and the 4 have roles to play, and so does the center. Everyone gets involved, and this is what we've been trying to tell you. In a movement-oriented offense, it's much better for everybody on the team. It's much more fun to play, but it is more complex. It takes more understanding, more awareness, and better skills. Okay, so now what I would like to do is take us back to one of our diagrams that we looked at when I talked about the drive-based offense. This was the first one we looked at, and I'm going to call this the 2-3 cross, or the 23 cross. This is actually a play that I picked up or heard from Coach Jovan Vavic when I had taken my son to a USC camp and stood on deck and spoke with the coach about his coaching philosophy and how he implemented things. And he described this particular play to me. And in his philosophy, the 2 would always start the offense. So the 2 would start the drive, and then the 3 would do something based on whatever the 2 did. So in this case, the 2 would go across ball side, which meant the 3 would go the opposite way down to back door. In both cases, the 1 and the 5 would slide up. The 4 would be the ball handler, and it would run pretty much as we have seen. Whether they used a pick or didn't use a pick wouldn't matter. That's how it would run. But there is another variation, which I'm going to call a 2-3 spread, where the 2 again starts the drive and the 3 goes the opposite direction. So in this case, the 2 decides to swim straight down to the 1 spot. The 1 still rotates up, and the 3 is now the one that drives ball side while the 5 rotates up, and the 4 is still handling the ball. In either case, X2 and X3 are still taken away from dropping back, leaving only the X4 to drop back, and leaving that 4 able to handle the ball. The 1 is still rotating up in order to be the outlet pass and to cover up on the counterattack. And so you end up with the same benefits. It's just a slight variation. Now, the fact that the 2 is always who starts this play, either by going ball side or going back door, then followed by the 3, explains why that pick was run the way it was at USC. And the reason why Coach Vavich wanted to do that is it's sort of a communication mechanism. Rather than have both the 2 and the 3 go at the same time, which happens if you don't have a set play or you're not sure what's going to happen, it just makes sense to have one player be the person that decides what the play is going to be. And for Coach Vavich, that was the player at the 2. So you would have the 2 either go straight down, go ball side, would either set a pick, maybe do a 2-1 pick, maybe do a 2-3 pick. So it's the 2 that would make this determination. At Redlands High School and in IE Storm Club, we changed that over to have the 3 be the determining factor. The 3 decides whether to go ball side or back door, and then the 2 goes the opposite way. And I believe for us, this is much more of a benefit, and it really worked out better for us for various reasons, which we explain in club and at high school. So I don't want to go into it here. Just let you know that it is a variation of what USC was doing. This is where I did get this play from, and it's my reason why we do it slightly differently. All right, so now that we've covered those fundamentals, what we're going to do is get back to the game, and we're going to see some plays that implement some of these concepts that I've talked about. Now, they're not going to all be exactly the same play. In fact, some of them may not even look like the same play. But the idea is to see how the players balance out. Sometimes they'll make mistakes and they've got to rebalance. You'll hear the coach occasionally yelling at them to move. But fundamentally, it's very similar. The 2 and the 3 moving down, the 1 and the 5 moving up. And occasionally you'll have somebody moving across the middle of the cage trying to clear things out because maybe things get jumbled up a little bit. So pay attention in this first one. You've got the 3 and the 4 on the opposite side crossing over each other. Then you have the 1 coming up and the 2 coming down. It's still a variation of this play because the 3 goes one way and the 2 goes the other way. So as you see here, the 3 goes across after the 4 drives in. Now the 1 comes up, he sets a pick, the 2 drives back down now. And with the 3 now moving over, getting out of the way, the 1 can slide into the middle. You can also see the 5 is driving along behind the center defender, and now that leaves the person in the middle who was the 1 went up and became the 2, gives him a wide open shot. So now you're going to see where the 1 comes all the way down. There's somebody in the middle. It's kind of at the 2. He moves over. That means the 1 slides up to become the 2, then drives straight down. The person at the 1 comes up. The defenders kind of get mixed up a little bit, and that gives an opportunity here to shoot. So let's see it again in slow motion. You see here, white cap number 4 on the near side here. He swims all the way down to the 1 spot. There is an attacker who's on a counterattack, swimming down the middle. There's a defender way back, so he doesn't really get an opportunity. So what he does is he starts to slide over to the 1 spot because there's already a center, as you can see just on either side. So he moves over. The 1 slides up, so it's just like the 2 driving straight down. But then what the 1 does is then he now drives down as if he were the 2 driving straight down. The 1 goes ahead. You can see the 1X, the X1 defender is looking at the 2 that's driving across. So they don't know whether they're going to switch. Now the 1 slides up. He's open. That defender has to come up and take him. And now that gives just enough time to get a cross pass, catch, and shoot. The goalie has to come all the way across the cage. Makes it very difficult for a goalie when that happens. So now we're going to see the play as I had drawn it up. Essentially, you're going to see the 3 do a give and go. He's going to go ball side. The 2's going to drive down, and the 1's supposed to rotate up. He doesn't really do exactly what he's supposed to do, so it does kind of mess the play up. And so he ends up not even getting an opportunity because there are too many defenders around. This is a really important point about understanding that the game is not about you scoring, it's about giving opportunities for your team to score. And as I said, these are early season games where a lot of times these are even top prospects from high school and they're not really familiar with this concept. So here we go again. You can see on the far side the 2 is driving down, the 1's going down to the 1, the 2 keeps going, the 3, so since the 2 is driving straight down, the 3 now goes ball side. The ball's over here at the 4. He's trying to take a look and see, what should I do? He gets a foul. You've got the 1 who's driving straight down. You still have the 3 driving ball side. So the 2, drives straight down. And what should happen now is the 1 should rotate straight up, but instead he tries to drive into the middle so that he's going to get the pass, but all it does is bring all the defenders there. So that was really a botched play in that sense. So here we have where the 3 actually goes back door, and the 2 should be trying to come across ball side. But see, he always gets himself so low that when he tries to come across ball side, he just was blocked by everybody else in the pool. But they are able to salvage it by crossing up the defense here. Here we'll watch it again in slow motion. So you see that the 2 and the 1 on the opposite side are all both driving down low. The 2 should remain higher. That gives him an opportunity to come across cage. So the 3 passes to the 4 and then ends up going back door. The 4 now has to wait. There's no outlet because the 2 is way too low. So now that the 3 is driving back door, the 2 is supposed to come across. You see him coming across here, but now he has to stop because everything's crowded in the middle. So now the 4 has to make a decision. The X4 is dropping back, so he gets to come in and attack. You heard the coach yelling at him to attack, attack, attack. He really doesn't want to shoot, so he ends up passing it over to the 5. And then what happens on the far side is that 2 and 1 actually kind of cross again, and that gives the opportunity for that same cross pass, catch and shoot that they were before. That's really not a great play. Redlands is really not playing very good defense. So on this one, you're going to see the coach getting a little bit frustrated. He starts yelling 36, 36, which means to drive from the 3 over to the weak wing, which he would call the 6. You can see the 2 drive down, and then once again, the 1 just sits there. You'll hear him yell, get out of there, get out of there. And then he drives in, and he ends up getting the opportunity, but it really was not the way the play is designed from when I've spoken to that coach. So here you have, again, the 3 is handling the ball. You've got a player driving down to the 1. You've got a player driving down to the 2. He's yelling at him to give it to the 4, give it to the 4. So he finally gives it over to the 4. Here we go. And then what he's going to do is try to drive. He's going to start out trying to sort of drive back door, but the coach starts yelling 36, 36, so he stops. He lets the defender kind of cross over, and then he takes the ball side. At the same time, now you're seeing the 2 on the opposite side is starting to drive down. The 1 should be driving up to be an outlet, and that's where the coach starts saying, get out of there, get out of there, get out of there. And what he does is he ends up crossing over and pops up in the middle, but the defender's there to take it away. So now the 4 is sitting here holding, and then what you'll see is the guy who's rotated up to the 2 now drives down and rotates in between where what they should have done in the first place, which is he drives down from the 2. The original 2 should have been up high. Now he drives down, then the defense gets crossed up as the 1 slides up. He gets open inside. All right, in this one you're going to see a good example of a team balancing back out after they didn't really run the play right. You see the 3 will drive down back door, but because the 2 and the 1 again are so low, there's really nothing that they can do. So now you actually saw there, and we'll see it here in slow motion, is you're going to see the player that was overloaded on the 1-2 side drive over behind the center because there's nobody at the 5. And when he drives over there, the ball gets passed over to the 4, and he actually gets an opportunity. So here you're seeing the 3 driving down because there was no 1. He's driving down to the 1 spot, ball side, or back door. The person who was at the 2 is now at the 3, so he's kind of holding the ball. He should be holding it in the air. He's holding it in the water because he's waiting for the center. He ends up passing it all the way over to the 5 spot. That causes the X4 to collapse. The 4 starts to slide in. And now what you're going to see is there's the 3 or the 4 with the ball now. Because they're all overloaded on that side, you're going to see the player who drove down, he was the 2 and he drove down to get inside. The 1 didn't slide up because the 3 was up there. So now you'll see him driving across the cage, goes to the 5, now it goes to the 4, and because that player who was at the 3 was rebalancing out, who was, at the 1, now he gets an opportunity, just misses the shot. So in this play, we're going to see a miscommunication that illustrates why it's so important for everybody to know where they're supposed to go. What you're going to see is the 3 is going to pass, and then both the 2 and the 3 are going the same way. And now all of a sudden, everything is kind of mixed up. You hear the coach, he's kind of trying to get people straightened back out again. So finally they do set themselves up, get themselves into position, and they get an opportunity, but the play was sort of broken because everybody kind of went the wrong direction. So we'll see this again. This is in slow motion. You see the 3 with the ball. The center is driving down right behind him. You've got the 1 and the 2 on the other side, 3 and the 4 on this side. So now, all of a sudden, you have everybody driving toward this side. But you will see a player who's going to drive around behind the center, then back up into the middle, kind of circling around. He's trying to rebalance out to get things back where he now can get a pass, and the team is balanced out. But as you can see here, it takes a little while for them to finally get things in order because there really doesn't appear to have been very good communication. They all kind of went the same way. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to end it. There were a couple of more times that a similar play was run. As I said, this is really a situation where the coach is trying out different plays. So even though they weren't all supposed to be exactly that same play, they were different variations of it where the 2 and the 3 go to opposite sides. The 1 and the 5 are supposed to rotate up. The 4 becomes the passer and then possibly even drives down to the 5 and does a pick or a rotation with the 5. So it's all about movement, and even occasionally you'll see the center move out and someone else drive in and post up, particularly if their normal center has not gotten in and posted up, or he can't get in front because the center defender is too good, so he's going to take that center defender out and let somebody else go in who can post up. But again, this illustrates why we need the whole team involved. Everybody needs to know what everybody else is doing. We all need to communicate and understand the plays. You can call the plays out in the water. The coach can call the plays out from deck. But everybody has to know what everyone else is doing. And that way you have a well-coordinated offense. If you do that, you can often stymie a defense that has not been very well trained. So that's one of the things we will strive for in high school and club. So go ahead, and I hope you enjoyed this video. We're going to hope to come out with another one pretty soon, and we hope you watch all of these. Thank you very much.